All right. HCBS Case Management Program has adopted 3 service goals as a focus for service delivery. These goals, while they can be tracked individually, are linked together to ensure a high-quality program that maximizes community impact. The first goal of case management is maintaining the greatest possible amount of independence and dignity for each person. Merriam-Webster defines independent as not requiring or relying on others. While none of us is completely independent in this way, there are other ways to define independence, such as independent living should not be defined in terms of living on one's own or being employed in a job fitting one's capabilities and interests, or having an active social life. These are simply aspects of living independently. Independent living has to do with self-determination. It is having the right and the opportunity to pursue a course of action, and it's having the freedom to fail and to learn from one's failures, just as non-disabled um, people do. Um, this core understanding of independence is what drives the case management program. Next slide. A central component of case management is supporting the dignity of each client. Though dignity and respect are often used interchangeably, there's a significant difference between them. I never really gave a whole lot of thought about the differences until this came up, and I kind of went on my own little witch hunt and doing some investigating on my own. Um, and so let's look at the next slide, Tom. Let's look at the specific differences. Dignity is formal reserve or seriousness of manner, appearance, or language. The quality or state of being honored or worthy or esteemed. Definition of respect is a relation or a reference to a particular thing or situation to consider worthy of high regard. If we use dignity as our anchor and our groundwork and our belief that every person has value, then we can separate people's actions from their essential humanity. For example, there may be a client who is verbally abusive to the case manager or to the aide providing services. The client does not need to be respected based on their behavior, but they do need to be treated with dignity. It may look like the same thing, treating the person with respect versus treating that person with dignity, but there is an important distinction. Respect acknowledges the behavior, while dignity teaches the importance of civility and humanity. Respect is optional, but dignity is not. Next slide.
Hang on. There we go. Wait a minute.
There we go. Assuming each client's inherent dignity is the framework that we're using in helping them attain optimal levels of health and well-being as they define it, not as we define it. Um, a word of caution about the God complex. That sense of, I know more than you. I know what's best for you. I assure you my care plan will fix you if you will simply follow it. Or, how in the world did you end up in this mess? We are to empower the client to make decisions they feel is right for them and then prepare them to accept the consequences of those decisions. Be careful about judgments. We don't judge people's choices because we don't know what their options were at the time. We are there to empower them to make decisions and help them to accept whatever those consequences as that may turn out. Back to you, Tom.
All right. Thank you, Benet. Let's see here. Fine. All right. So the second goal for case management is ensuring the right services at the provided levels for the right duration to the satisfaction of the consumer and at preferred times to the extent possible. And this gets back to the whole concept of assessment and care planning. Doing a comprehensive initial assessment, understanding the client's perception of the need and why that need is important, and what is their perception of the barriers, solutions, and their ideal. Um, Again, using the biopsychosocial cultural model that looks at the interaction between a person's biology, their mental health, their environment, and all of those pieces and how those fit together, determining whether collateral information is needed. The elements of a thorough assessment are their functional strengths and needs, their environment, formal and informal support, cognition, values, preferences, and social functioning. Okay. And as we mentioned before, that the process of reassessment should lead to adjustments in the type of services or the quantity of services based on the changing needs of the client. Okay. Back to Benet. Benet.
Sorry about that. I'm just rattling along. The third goal of case management is building and strengthening family and community support. We collaborate with the client in a way that focuses on moving the individual to self-care whenever possible. A thorough assessment will identify the formal and informal supports that the client currently has in his or her network. Using a conversational approach, we help identify supports that the client may not think of or be aware they're actually using. We can also identify potential resistance to using those networks effectively, such as that tired old excuse we often get, oh, I really don't want to bother my daughter. She's just so busy. We also assess the viability of family support. Is it reliable? Is it available? Is it knowledgeable about what needs to be done? And if it is there, is the family support willing to learn what needs to be done? Through the assessment process, we facilitate the client's awareness of and connections with community supports and resources. We then help the client identify any gaps and possible strategies to fill in those gaps. We also create the opportunity to teach consumers how to advocate for themselves through information, education, and support. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you. All right. So, service outcomes and indicators are something that United Way of America began working on back in the mid '90s, and basically, what this is to help us measure the impact of our services, not just counting numbers of clients or numbers of hours of case management or number of meals or whatever, but how are the services that we're providing benefiting the client? How are they benefiting the community? So for our case management program, we have identified 3 outcomes. The first one is experiencing a reduction in risk factors that contribute to out-of-home placement. Now, nursing home placement is a multifactorial thing, and I don't expect us to accomplish all of that through case management, but we have selected 3 indicators. One is an increased support, as measured by the unmet need score from the DONR. So theoretically, if we have identified an unmet need in the client's life that presents a risk of nursing home placement, and we have addressed that need, we should see their unmet need score in the DONR go down, so we can document that. Indicator number 2 is a reduction in intention to place. So if I have a caregiver, I should be doing Section 8 of the RAT. There is a question on there about intention to place. So we should be looking at that piece, and we'll look at that in more detail in just a second. Okay. The third indicator is the number of risk factors indicated by periodic reassessments. And again, the RAT assessment is going to help us do that. So either I have gone from a high risk to a moderate risk, and I can document that change based on interventions, or I'm still in the moderate category, and let's say I've gone from an 11 to a 9.5. Okay, I can still show improvement in risk. So this is the Section H on the RAT. And the first question is, given your relative's current condition, would you consider placing him or her in a different type of care setting? And there are 4 responses. Now, I will say that if their choices are definitely would or probably would, then the trajectory of my services is going to take a different route. Okay. If somebody is definitely going to place their person, then I'm going to be looking at short-term services to help during that transition, okay? Or I'm going to have a conversation about, is there anything we can put in place that might change that decision for you, okay? But there's no point in working to keep that client at home if the caregiver has already made that decision. But again, I want to assess intention to place as one of my outcomes and look to remediate that. Okay. The second outcome is that individuals we work with will have an increased awareness and or access to services, and that's one of the key components of case management is connecting clients to resources in the community. Okay. So indicator number 1 is services that we offer or refer or provide by the case manager, okay? That can be suggesting services, referring them to services. Even if I suggest a service or make them aware of a service and they refuse it, I have still provided that information to them, and I would count that as an indicator, okay? Number of education activities, and this could be related to disease education, disease management, progression of a disease, how to use assistive technology, a variety of educational activities that we do that could count. And then also reducing barriers to accessing services. So as we document barriers clients have, we also want to, if we reduce barriers, that meets that outcome. So the way we track these outcomes is in the data system. If I go to the Case Notes tab and add a note, there is a section where I get to note type and note subtype. Okay. If I choose note type care coordination - case management, then I have these 3 note type subtypes pop up. This is where I'm going to track those outcomes. Okay. And so I would, for example, select that I provided education and I showed client how to use the glucometer and discussed some assistive I discussed a wide grip spoon for assistive technology. Okay. It's not required that you do 3 different notes to track more than one of these. One is sufficient, and then you can put the description in and your case note accordingly. This is in the case management data system manual, but this gives you kind of a brief overview of the 3 types of service outcomes. Again, information provided to a client that makes them aware of services, education around chronic disease, accessing the system, assistive technology, a variety of things, or then actually offer services or suggested services to the client. I found this quote I liked: "A goal without a plan is just a wish." And so, our purpose here in developing these outcomes is to actually document the difference that we've made in the lives of the clients that we serve.